Welcome everyone. Welcome again to another WBL Institute session. This particular session is actually our kickoff session for the WBL Bootcamp. So we're really excited. We're doing 4 weeks of a specialized PD that is basically tailored to all of the WBL coordinators and staff who are working to get a deeper foundation of the WBL elements as seen through the eyes of the CTE team. So we really appreciate that you guys, again, are making time today. Please come back for the 4 sessions in their entirety. We're going to be doing this every Wednesday at 2:30 in April. And then we're going to continue with our regular scheduling of the WBL Institute. So if we can move to the next slide. Again, this is the landing page. Within this particular landing page, once you go through, you'll find the calendar, you'll find the bootcamp flyer, as well as the list of our previous sessions. And you can go through the links to Eventbrite to get your tickets. Assuming you're here and you went through this process, hopefully you also filled out the WBL pre-survey, which we really were hopeful that most people would do to give us more of a sense of exactly what it is that you guys are hoping to drill down into in terms of more detailed information. And we can also provide that pre-survey link for those of you who didn't get a chance to fill it out, because we do want that information. But we are glad that you're continuing to go here and register and hopefully get really great content. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Moving to the next slide. Once again, our meeting norms are the same. We really are hopeful that everyone will participate to make this session useful. We hope you will commit to being present during the time, whether it's in the breakout rooms or just listening and hearing the content, asking questions. We do encourage you to speak up live and engage in the chat if you prefer. And we do hope that you will continue to complete the exit survey, because we use that to really get a sense of how we're doing and how we can improve these sessions as we move into the final few months of the Institute. So moving to the next slide. Presenting today will be myself, Larry Fleming Williams, as always, and then Kendall Samuel and a couple of members of the PAQ team, the Program Approval and Quality team. So we welcome them and definitely want to be able to get some specific expertise around sequencing. And so moving forward to the next slide, you'll get a sense of what our topic is for today. And here's the flyer once again. So hopefully you saw this already. All of the 4 weeks that we will be doing this. Today's session is WBL sequencing. And so what we really are hoping that we're going to cover today is reviewing the NICET expectations around the WBL scope and sequence and what that should look like, and some of that guidance that's provided. We also want to outline the steps to align your scope and sequence with the standards that NICET has provided. So some of you have already created a scope and sequence, and others of you maybe are looking to rebuild, especially as you're going up for program approval. A lot of this documentation is being put together, and you want to make sure that it is done in such a way that it will be approved. And so we really want to make sure that you know exactly what that should look like. And then also we want to identify the stakeholders who should be involved in this work. Hopefully it's not just you carrying this load. We want to really encourage more of a team type of approach. We hope that you are corralling other folks who are touching on this work, who may be guidance counseling staff, who might be APs, who might be, besides CTE teachers, other subject area teachers, because I think everyone working together is really what makes this work sustainable. And that's what we really are hopeful for once these series come to a close. And then finally, we want to discuss tailoring the sequence of WBL activities to fit the needs of your students. We do want to make sure that we always include special populations in the conversation. And we know that you have to make certain allowances or considerations, if you will, as we start to think about, am I serving these students as best as possible? So in your planning, in your putting things together, we want you to have an eye to those populations to make sure that you are being inclusive and that they are also getting rich experiences of WBL. So moving to the next slide. We want you guys to really engage today, and part of what we have offered is breakouts later on. And to make the breakout transition easier, we're hopeful that you can help us out now. Most of you have named yourselves, whether it's your first name, last name, whether it's just your first name. We're hopeful that you can actually put a number in front of your name so we know exactly what group you want to be in. So today's breakouts, we have 4 in mind. We have documenting WBL, which will go more into how do I put these specific experiences and activities, whether it's into CTS or into the record book. We also want to talk through, remote documentation. If you're doing remote activities, what are some of the things that you should be thinking about as you, make a record of those things. You want to be able to have your sign-in sheets done. You want to be able to make sure that students are able to get into rooms and be, know the amount of time that they need to be experiencing things to be able to have those things count. So that would be your second group. The third group, we're going to talk about incorporating partners into this because we understand that partnership is really the only way that students are able to get actual exposure. So in terms of adding new partners, what are some ways that you can think about sequencing as it relates to bringing partners into the conversation? How do you create a sequence and where do I plug partners into that sequence? And then finally, partnering for special populations. For those of you who did fill out the survey, we got a lot of folks saying that, they're still not sure as to how to incorporate special populations in their thinking. So we have experts here who can really help you and guide you as to the best way to include those populations in your planning to make sure that right up front, your students are getting the best possible exposure. So we want to make sure that there's kind of an even flow within all of the groups, but we are taking a look at, the numbers that you put in front of your name as the first kind of line of defense in terms of placing people, and then we will go from there. So we definitely hope that you're going to get exactly what you're looking for today, and there will be an opportunity to switch if need be, but we're hopeful too that if you're continuing for all of the 4 weeks with us, that you're in the same group so that you can continue to have discussion and participate almost like a PLC with those who are in the group with you. So we hope that will hopefully richen the experience, so it's not a whole bunch of random folks every time. So moving to the next slide.
Nakia, before we move to the next slide real quick, I noticed a couple people putting into the chat the number that you mentioned. If at all possible, can you use the rename option to include the number with your name instead of putting it in the chat? That'll probably be more helpful moving along.
Yeah, because we won't be able to scan the chat for everyone who has put their option in the chat. So if you go to your square, if you're viewing yourself in the gallery view, you see on the upper right-hand corner of the square, if you actually hover your pointer, you'll see mute, unmute, and you'll see 3 dots. If you click on those 3 dots, you have the option of mute my audio, stop video, pin, spotlight for everyone, rename is in there. If you click on rename, you should be able to just click in and add a 1, 2, 3, or 4 in front of your name. So hopefully that's not too difficult of a process for folks. If for whatever reason we don't see the number of your preference, you might get put into a group that may not necessarily be the right one. So we just want to make sure that you guys do that as early as possible. There's still time, but try to do it now if you can.
And Takia, I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but Chrisana has a question I'm hoping that you can guide her through. What if you're new and is trying to set this up at your school? Which group would be best for you?
That's a great question. I think starting with the documentation is probably your best bet. Just because if you're new, you really want to make sure that you're sticking with the NYSED guidance and you're understanding exactly what you need to fill out. If there are formal things, whether it's in CTS or just in terms of keeping a record, because again, those are the things that you're going to be kind of beholden around as time goes on. So we just want to make sure that you have that down. And then in terms of adding additional supports and partners and thinking about the special populations lens, in my opinion, those things can come after. But I really want to make sure that you're clear on the NYSED expectations because we are focusing on that this year. So it might be good to just get a jump start on that initially. But again, we are opening it up so that next week, for those of you who are coming back, if you feel for whatever reason that you want to switch groups, we are allowing one-time window for people to jump out and go to a different group. If you don't think that the group you're in is addressing your needs, please let us know so that we can switch you. So if that means reaching out to myself or Larry separately after the session. So that's an opportunity. But again, in terms of Chrisana's question, I would start with group number 1. So we want to be able to move to the next slide, and I'm hopeful that I can hand the mic over to Kendall Samlal if he's here. If he's not, I will continue to run with the baton. So just giving a few seconds to see if Kendall is available.
I'm here, Kia.
Awesome, thank you. So take it away.
All right, welcome everyone. Good afternoon. So in terms of the NYSED compliance elements, and I think we've been going through this a lot throughout this year, and this time we just want to make sure that folks have some clarity on this. And we'll start off with the record book. So for the last, I would say, 2 years, this was something that we had made a requirement for all of our programs here in New York City. And schools are still encouraged to utilize the record book. I know that right now we are transitioning over to CTS, in which that we'll be entering all of our interactions and the student participation in activities, and then you'll be able to run a report called the WBL record book. But until then, please continue to have your record book in place in which you're documenting all of the stuff that you are doing with your students. One of our documents that we did share with folks does have the WBL sequence that you are encouraged to create at the beginning of that record book. The sequence is very much important because that shows that you're planning different WBL activities which are scaffolded towards students reaching some type of mastery at the end. So you will start off with the exploration and awareness, and then end with exploration. Another piece of the thing that you'll be looking for is an articulation agreement, and that's a requirement for all CT programs. So that articulation agreement must be between the school program and the college or a post-secondary institution, even a trade school, and it must clearly identify the benefits to the students once they attend that trade school or post-secondary institution. Your curriculum crosswalks, you will need to have one for each course in that sequence. And each of those curriculum crosswalks would need to have alignment to academic standards, industry standards, and CDOS. And under industry standards, you can utilize the CCTC or the Career Cluster Framework, and even standards which come out also from the Commission, as well as standards which are specific to that particular industry, especially those that lead in licensure. You need to have a course description or syllabus for each course, accompanied by one lesson plan per course in the sequence. And we do highlight that that lesson plan shows how you're making accommodations for students with IEPs or 504 plans. When you're going up for the external review, there's always going to be changes with a NYSED application. So we've noticed sometimes it happens twice or 3 times within a year. So if you started filling out an application and we do ask you to redo according to a new updated one, please bear with us because until things solidify there, or I guess things are always evolving. There's always going to be that constant flux with that. So there's two parts to the NICET application. Part one handles most of the data, and part two handles more of the narrative of the program. In getting ready for your external review, one of the requirements is that you have 2 industry partners and 1 post-secondary partner be a member of that external review committee. And their role is that they would be reviewing the work done during the self-study process. So they will be looking at your self-study report, as well as your curriculum, the set articulation agreement, and your employability profile. Move to the next slide, Takia. Takia, can move to the next slide. Thanks. So now your program, like I mentioned before, will be completing the self-study report. And again, we are in that transition phase, but that will be a report that's going to be generated in CTS once everything is fully functional. You will need to, just as this is a next question, FYI reminder, is that each sequences must be a minimum of 7 credits. And where CFM is a standalone course offering 1 credit, or it's embedded. And when it's embedded, it does not offer a credit. You must have appropriately certified CTE teachers for each course, and appropriately identified 3-part technical assessment. The first 2 parts of technical assessment is going to be vendor-based or derived, and the third part is school-based, and that can be either project or portfolio. The employability profile, we have established one for our district, which clearly identifies the 21st century skills. And all schools have to do now is just basically enter in their technical skills. You also asked for the external review to have training plans and employee evaluations, minimum of 2 samples, so that we can see what has been utilized during your time of working with the students with WBL. The next slide, again. So we have this chart that was created so folks can see how we are breaking down ways to apply those WBL hours and the experiences. So in the first, so you notice in the first column, in terms of CTE endorsement onto your diploma, the requirement there is that students would be participating in a WBL experience that would be part of that program of study. And the next 2 columns cover the CDOS credential and the CDOS pathway, in which that the WBL experiences requirement is that you have 216 hours. Now, it's 216 hours of which 54 hours must be WBL, which means the other 162 would either be WBL or CTE coursework. So if a student did 2 CTE classes, then they would have to do 108 hours of WBL in order to make that requirement for the 216. The last column to the right shows that this is our goals that we are adhering to for those that are approved programs and are required for Perkins. So each of your program CTE concentrators will be participating in completing 54 hours of WBL, and that can be attained during the course of the program, so during the 4 years that they did in high school. Okay. We'll move on to the next slide, or do you want me to take the questions right now, Takia?
If we could do this slide, then we'll open it up for questions if that's okay.
Sure, no problem. So for the scope and sequence guidance, these are items which should be made available to all students in your sequence. Your sequence at your school will look different from another school's sequence because there are different resources, different partners, and even in the event that you have the same career field, those two variables hold true. should your specific program or study and need to have the reflection of the annual self-study process, this is something that we actually make it a requirement of all schools that yearly you're supposed to have a self-study reflection, and that's documented in the responses to your self-study report. And when you're doing that, one of the key elements for folks is to keep in mind is that you want to have the curriculum be addressed, the employability profile be addressed, and the articulation be addressed to make sure that is still relevant and the standards and the skills are still competitive in that career field. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kendall. So moving to the next slide, I'm going to pass the baton to Larry just to talk through just tailoring this to your students.
Thanks, Zakia. So I guess when thinking about, and I'm going to go through this a little quick just because I'm going to also mention this again in the scope and sequence document. But when thinking about the WBL scope and sequence, these are the students that you should be considering. Students with IEPs and 504 plans, the transfer students, and students facing extenuating circumstances, your Ls and MMLs, and your accelerated students. Okay, just gonna drop a poll into before we move on to the next slide. I'm just gonna drop a quick poll if everyone can take it real quick. I'll just leave it open for the next 35 seconds.
Daddy.
We're almost there. It's another 10 seconds if anyone else wants to respond. And thanks for that. Okay. Oops. Oh no. I apologize. Sorry about that. So first, I just want to take everybody through the scope and sequence map. So I'm going to transition over to the map, but I'm also going to drop the link to the map in the chat, just so that everyone can follow along with me at the same time or at your own pace. I just dropped the scope and sequence into the chat room. So the scope and sequence map provides clear path and context on how students should experience WBL by both phase and grade. So column A of the map breaks down the WBL experiences according to phases. And I just dropped the link in the chat so you can follow along. And those phases are career awareness, career explorations and planning, career preparation, and career training. Column B showcases the recommended grade levels the activities should be prioritized, and we'll come back to that in a little bit. Column C through E, gonna highlight it real quick, spells out the different work-based learning activities and also provides information on the career readiness framework, the different work-based learning experiences, and WBL activities grid, which Takia will elaborate on in a few minutes. The exposure of these activities and resources will determine the pace students experience work-based learning. Columns F and G indicate which activities are NICET approved and CDAW standard approved. There are also hyperlinks that are listed in the title, and they'll take you to the how to apply work-based learning hours and experiences document that Kendall just went over previously. Column H and I are the WBL activity and the grade recommendations for that activity. Column J is the remote activity modifications column, which provides a link to resources for work-based learning in both a virtual and remote space. And as always, equity and access continue to be a top priority. So columns K and L provide better guidance and resources on working with special populations. The links embedded in the considerations for L students and students with disabilities are consistently updated and provided by the Department of Multilingual Learners and the Division of Specialized Instruction and Student Support. The scope and sequence map was structured so that the tools and resources would complement each other towards producing quality WBL activities. From the pre-survey that we gave you guys and some of the responses, we noticed that people haven't been able to review the scope and sequence in detail, or some people didn't review it at all. And we definitely appreciate that you're comfortable enough to share that experience with us. The structure is meant to provide context, but we also want to be intentional in letting everyone know that the scope and sequence we share with you guys is not permanent in its current state, and it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all model. It's only a framework, and the structure provided to show how the activities and resources work together to promote career readiness for your students. So there's going to be some tailoring involved on your part. And the truth is, we came up with this guide, but you know your students better than we do. So this is the part where, you have to be the seamstress and do a little bit of tailoring once you review the scope and sequence. So it might, if you're looking at the scope and sequence, it might be fine in its current state for some schools, but for others, it might be helpful to look at the grid and then break down the activities according to tiers or the type of students that you're dealing with. Your scope and sequence should be creating a pipeline towards ensuring that all students have been given opportunities to be career ready, even if they don't all get internships. So it's shifting the mindset a little bit and thinking of, how can I make adjustments to the order of the scope and sequence so that it benefits all my students? Top tier students can probably breeze through the activities and go straight to the internship portion, but for the students who might need some preparation before receiving an internship, how can you restructure the scope and sequence so that it fits the needs of students with IEPs or transfer students or L students? Even if the students don't benefit by getting an internship this year, how do I make sure that they're internship ready for next year? The scope and sequence will look very different depending on your school, your industry sector, and the type of students you serve, but it should always speak to the development and progress of your students. And I will hand it back over to Takia to walk through the WBL activities grid.
Thank you so much, Larry. And I really appreciate what you said, just in terms of the tailoring, but also, getting a sense from the polls that people kind of still somewhat don't get all of the NYSET expectations. I mean, there were a good number of you guys who have said, okay, got it. But there's still a few people who are like, I still don't know. And there are those that have said, well, I'm kind of getting there, which means we still have work to do. So we want to continue to, reinforce these, underscore these as much as we possibly can. And so I'm going to try to go through the activity grid, which is another tool that was created through the PAQ team, actually, to be a little bit more helpful in terms of what NYSET is approving for activities this year. I know there's a question in the chat around whether or not guest speakers are approved, and no, they're not approved this year. And it's not that guest speakers are not an important activity or that students don't get exposure from guest speakers. But again, we want to make sure it's a sustained activity with the industry, which hopefully will help individual students, not just students who are a captive audience, who aren't, actually connecting that particular exposure opportunity with something that is more of a skill developer. So unfortunately, with the guest speakers, it's usually a one-time event, and most often there isn't a task that is aligned to it or connected to it. So that's one of the reasons why it hasn't been approved. Not to say that it won't in the future. So to the question that some folks have asked, Gerard in the chat asked about whether or not we'll be able to download this. We don't really want folks to download these because we are consistently updating them when we hear from NYSED. So it's what we call live. Both of these documents are live, meaning that, you know, from day to day, there are edits being made. So if you download the version that you see, it may be that it has been changed in the next week, which would mean that you'll end up with the old version. So, you know, I've been asked that question multiple times. And so I just want to reiterate, you know, we want to provide the link, which you can go to at any point, but we want to kind of, you know, discourage people from downloading and having an actual copy that they save. So I will go through the grid, which hopefully all of you have already seen. You know, we've done these workshops now a few times. So I want to make sure that you guys are aware that this is for you. It was created for you and specifically to answer your questions. So going to the first tab, which is accepted WBL activities, this was the original page that was created with all of the different activities that NYSED had approved previously. So if you look to column A, you'll see that on the list, we have everything from community service, internship, mentoring, job shadows, school-based enterprise, on-site projects, supervised clinical experience, youth apprenticeship, and then other, which I guess would be a category for schools that have specialized programming that needs to be considered individually. This was what was originally put out. And then we wanted to make sure that for this COVID year, we could amend it. So there was an additional tab created. The second tab, however, is basically the 0 hour supporting activities. Before I get to that, I just want to make sure that people are on this first tab and see that there are definitions here, everything you need to know in terms of what does one of these activities constitute or what it should constitute to be able to gain credit. If you scroll over, you will see in example column, that is C and D, which will tell you, you know, what these could look like, and also modifications for remote. So if you've already pivoted to remote, you don't necessarily need these examples, but for those people who are still maybe struggling, these are some things that hopefully can help you by setting context around like the industry and how it makes sense that this could then be a remote activity. Then you have columns E through K, which basically list out whether these activities are valid for work-based learning, valid for CDOS, valid for CTE endorsement, and then the accompanying documents that need to happen within CTS to be able to constitute in all of the supports for this to be able to be verified as an experience. So for example, you have the employability profile, the training plan, the supervisory evaluation. Those things must accompany the actual activity itself to then be able to be checked for valid. And then in terms of hours accumulated, sometimes they're variable, other times there's actually a suggested value in column K, but hopefully you'll take the time to go through this. It is not something that you should just kind of brush through. You should certainly take, you know, especially if there are activities that you're still wondering about, take a minute to read through and be clear on exactly what it is that is expected. So moving into the second tab, it's 0 hour supporting activities. We call them 0 hour. I know that's not the most savory description because technically these actual activities do help students to be able to step up to internship. And so internship is not the be all and end all. Some of these other activities are really meaningful for students and help them to really leave with, you know, their portfolio so that they can take that next step into their post-secondary career. And so some of those activities, career days, elevator pitch, guest speakers, mock interviews, resume and cover letter development. These were originally thought of as non-credit bearing activities by NYSET. And then COVID hit and things changed. So if you go to the last tab, the third tab, which is the school year 2021 COVID exception activities, you'll see that many of the 0 hour, quote unquote, 0 hour activities have migrated to actually be valid now for credit. So career days now can count, mock interviews, resume and cover letter development, and networking event. And so the caveat here is that these activities now have to be built in such a way that they encourage the sustained actual exposure with the industry. And so industry has to engage with students in such a way that it showcases that time has been spent, that they have had a chance to really get to know the student, or at least have some interaction with them that is meaningful, which will hopefully let the student come away feeling as though they have a better insight into that particular pathway. A one-time event such as a guest speaker doesn't necessarily give that in-depth exposure that a student who maybe is sitting in the back of the classroom is going to get. You really want to make sure that there has been some back and forth, and there is actual feedback by the industry as to how the student is doing and whether there has been skills growth in that process. So if you go through this document, again, same categories, but it's telling you specifically what some of these examples would look like for those activities to be migrated to actual credit bearing ones this year. We don't know what next year is going to look like, but we're going to keep these 3 tabs, just in case we continue to get these as credit bearing in the next few months. And so, if there are additional questions, we want to be able to make sure that you leave here feeling really solid. And for those of you who said, I'm still not sure, that you will walk away feeling like, okay, I have a good grasp on this. So if we move to the next slide, we want to be able to talk through the key stakeholders here. And, these are the people who are listed as your self-study team members, folks who, as you start to prepare for approval, who should be assisting in this process. And I'll leave it open too for Kendall, Omari, or anyone else from PAQ to chime in. But the list of folks here is who you should also be, tagging when it comes to, supports, whether it's, documenting certain things, getting suggestions around students who could be involved, folks who can, talk through the employability profile, who know exactly where students are in terms of their skills growth and what their post-secondary plan looks like, thinking about how industry could be involved and ways that they should be offering to provide volunteers or, build out actual activities with you, thinking through what makes sense for that industry and how students can really gain the skills that are employable based on that lens. You want to also think about post-secondary partners. So for some of you, you already are, talking to CUNY or talking to colleges who may be looking at, what kinds of experiences would make students actually successful in college classes, and talking about students and alumni and their experience in the program, things that they might suggest based on what worked for them and what didn't work for them. And also alumni who've graduated, who have moved forward and can look back and maybe also support as, peer mentors for your students who are going through your CTE track at the moment. So you have a plethora of people who you work with. Some of you, when you answered the pre-survey, said that you may have just you and one other person on your team. We obviously don't want you to be a lone wolf in this. And, having 7 or 8 people is awesome. Most of us are not there. And so we really want you to start thinking about, in the approval phase, these are the folks you're going to have to marshal anyway to be a part of that process. So why not get them involved early? Help them to be able to understand exactly what your need is, what the ask is around work-based learning, and then make them a part of your post-secondary team. That's really what we would advise. And I think for those of you who have more than 2 or 3 people assisting, the lift is a little bit lighter. You know, we understand that being a work-based learning coordinator is a full-time job. And unfortunately, people are doing 2 or 3 other roles in addition. So it is a lot of work, especially when you add SYP and all of the other programs that you have to prepare students for. So, you know, hopefully by helping to get a team together, you're making it easier to delegate some things, but also to have thought partners and to, you know, get folks who might be, you know, additionally supporting you in this work. So with that, we're going to move to the next slide. And open it up for Q&A. So I know that there's been questions in the chat, and Omari thankfully has been answering some of them as well. Kendall has answered some questions. If there are folks who want to unmute and ask questions on the floor, you're welcome to do so now. You're also still open to putting them in the chat, and we will air them for edification of the group. So we're going to give it a few more minutes and let you guys either type questions or ask questions. I'm wondering if we did the poll again now, if there would be any change at all. Just curious. Hopeful that folks have maybe a better understanding, but we still have time. So please, 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 if you have questions, now is your opportunity.
We can always relaunch that just to test that theory, Takia.
Larry,
I want to go back to the chat. So,
sure.
Maureen's question and wondering why the New York State CT endorsement does not require the career plan. So, the reason being is that the requirements for a CT endorsement is separate and apart from that, and we utilize the the employability profile. And there's other requirements that obviously students have to do in terms of making sure they meet the other graduation requirements and Regencies there. For the career plan, because this was a document that lived with CDOS, because before CDOS was mentioned for all students, it was only an option for students with IEPs, and the career plan was a required document with the student's IEP. So they just kept it there as well. Does that help, Marie?
Thank you so much. That was very helpful. Thank you. Sorry, I'm having some internet in going in and out. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We hear you well, though.
Thanks.
Thank you, Kendall. Okay, I see another question in the chat by Maria. If you're going for program approval this year, will the examiners expect to see the scope and sequence grid? And I don't know if you...
Yeah,
Go
the
ahead,
answer
Kendall.
to that would be a yes. They're going to be looking at everything related to work-based learning that you're doing. They will also be looking at how you're advertising your work-based learning opportunities to students. You know, what are you to explain to students in terms of their on entry to your program about expectations, and again, individual opportunities that come up while they're in program.
Hopefully that answers your question, Maria. Any other questions? We still have some time, and you guys
So there's
have an
one
expert.
here. There's one here that says, can you explain the benefits of the CT endorsement for school, CT teacher, and students? Well, the CT endorsement, the weight of it is the same as an advanced Regents diploma. So if just want to be a mere facts of that in index alone, that's huge for a school. And then for the students, it's another way that they can showcase their diploma. I don't know, I don't want to age myself, but back in the day when we had advanced Regents diplomas, it meant something back then. So nowadays it's, you know, the Regents diploma, sorry, back in my day we just had Regents diploma. So it was different from having an advanced Regents diploma. So it was a big thing to have a Regents diploma and graduate. So as much endorsements that they have, the best that you would want to have for a student. And then also too, normally when you have a CT endorsement diploma, that also means that if there is a industry certification that a student needs to be competitive in that career field, they have attained it as well.
Thank you for that. Here's another question in the chat from Mr. Jason McIntosh. Are we still expected to meet all the requirements for reapproval, even though COVID is a factor?
Yes, because even though what we will be looking at and what the state's going to look at is what did you do during COVID? You know, what are you articulating took place during COVID for students? I mean, if you did nothing, and then you list down why you did nothing. If you did a little, then you list down, you know, what you were able to do would be based upon the resources and the challenges you have. Everything when it comes down to reapproval is they want to see the data, and then if there's a so-called blip in the data or an issue with the data, they want to see what exactly are you articulating for the reasons for that.
And the addendum to the question is, and on time. Are they expecting to have folks meet all of the requirements on time?
Yeah, because in essence, when you look at the basic requirements that would, you know, disqualify your program from being approved, right? You're looking at the curriculum crosswalks, which should be in place already, because even if you are having remote, you're still teaching the standards, okay? If you have appropriately licensed certified teachers. Now, God forbid someone teacher had left, even if it was COVID or not COVID, you're still not having an appropriate certified teacher teaching that course. So then that puts that in jeopardy. Your articulation agreements, you know, they're still moving forward because colleges are still enrolling students. So all these things, you know, COVID unfortunately happened a year ago. And if you're up for reapproval right now, this year or next year, then they still want to hear what have you been doing to sustain your program for the last 3 years. Now with the teacher part, I think that's like the biggest variable that, you know, we can't really help too much around. So the earlier that becomes an issue for you and you let us know, we can be able to help support you in that efforts. We may not be able to have an exact answer or solution, but we are going to work our best to make sure that you stay in the approved status.
Thank you. And I don't know, was Eric Foster's question answered? Can you explain the benefits of the CTE endorsement for the school, the CTE teacher, and the students?
Yeah, I just mentioned that.
You did. Got it. Okay, so additional questions. I think that's it. Again, we have a few more minutes. If there's anybody else who wants to sneak a question in there, you still have some time. Otherwise, we will also be publishing the chat questions as part of the resource library. So for those of you who may have missed the answer that might have been typed by Kendall or Omari, we will make sure that you have a copy of that so you can refer back to it as well. But this recording is going to be available. So please get your question heard so that others can benefit. We do think that this is a community, and some of the actual wisdom is here in the room. And so we don't want you to miss out on that. And so if there aren't any other questions that are top of mind, the chat is still available. We'll make sure that we get them answered. We're going to go ahead and pivot to the next segment, and I will give the baton back to Larry.
Thanks, Takia. So, and thank you for also mentioning that, you know, we do like to think of ourselves as a community. A lot of times when we give these presentations, we hope that they are not one-sided and that, you know, it comes off very policy heavy. And sometimes it's worth hearing it from someone who's doing the work as opposed to us who's basically sharing our thoughts on how you can be doing the work. So today we've invited a guest. She is the culinary arts instructor and WBL coordinator at Long Island City High School, Miss Laura Parker. If you can take yourself off mute. Laura, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Keeping my head above water here.
That's all we can do. I hear that. I don't know if you want to start off by just giving a little spiel about yourself if you want.
Sure. So my name is Laura Parker. I'm at Long Island City High School now. This is my 14th year. I am a CTE culinary instructor and work-based learning coordinator. I am also working with our hospitality program, and then we also have another program that's in the development process, and that's for sports medicine. So we have a couple of different things going on, and that's what I do. So
thank you for that. So just going to take you through a couple of questions. Won't take long. It's nothing nail biting. Just in regards to the WBL sequencing, what's your process?
So, our program for culinary has been in place, for over 20 years now. So I came into a structure that was already in place, and then developed it further with all of the NICEAD requirements that have changed over the years. And then that helped us with developing for our hospitality and our sports medicine program. So, basically following what you had shown just a little bit earlier is how we build upon it, is starting with the awareness piece in their ninth and 10th grade, and then moving into exploration and planning, and then finally into that preparation mode where typically in the 11th and 12th grade is where our internships are taking place. But, the internship, while that's a great end piece and that next step into their career, it's not meant for everybody. It's not something that every student achieves. So that, because we know that not every student's going to get to that point, we need to make sure that our other WBL activities are, quality for the students and giving them transferable skills in case they do, switch over into other careers. So we really make sure that, every level of our sequence is giving the students what they need to prepare them for their futures.
Thanks for that, Laura.
Mm-hmm.
And how are you tracking on a week-to-week basis?
So, CTS is running as we all know, and is developing as we're moving through it. So I have personally not, I haven't had the time. I'll be very honest with you. I haven't had the time to get everything onto CTS. So I'm still continuing our work-based learning tracking book, which is basically an Excel spreadsheet, and we keep details on every activity that the students are doing. So we document it really on our side right now, and it's tough. It's been a tough year of just everything that needs to get done. So I'm teaching 4 different grade levels this year and recreating everything, to make it remote friendly. So it takes a lot of time to be able to do all of the data collection. So, we're doing the best we can, keeping it where we have been accustomed to, and we'll at some point get it, switched over to CTS as the time presents itself.
Speaking of time, and I know this does take a lot of time, how many people are involved in that process?
So a lot of, mostly everything gets filtered through me, but there are many people that are part of the process. So we have in our school, between the culinary and hospitality, there's 4 of us that are actively doing different parts of all the CT documentation. Essentially everything does come down through me so that I can double check and make sure that everything's done. But we do kind of delegate the work amongst the team, guidance counselors, and we have a community-based partner that does some of our college and career prep stuff. So we use different departments throughout the school to work on different aspects of the prep that we need for the students. But then when the documentation piece, that comes down to myself and the other CT teachers.
Nice. And what stakeholders are you engaging in the work?
So, we rely heavily, we said, Takia already said it, this is really a full-time job. And I've said this all the years that I've been participating in WBL. This really is a full-time job if you want to be able to, get every single aspect of it and plan it and develop those partnerships and so forth. And because we are teaching while we're doing this, we have to really lean upon our partners to really help us through it, right? So, the biggest thing, you guys with Central have offered out the CTISB program. There were some bumps in the roads. There were some, there was some processing, things that we had to get used to and get it out and running. But once it was out and running, it should be something that everybody's participating in. ISP has just afforded us, we just got 20 placements for our culinary program. We got a few hospitality remote internships. So, that we definitely use all the programs that are coming out from Central because, you guys are doing this great work for us. So that it'd be silly for us to try to do everything on our own. So we take advantage of that. We also are working with our network intermediaries. So with CCAP and with NAF for hospitality. So we're working there. We're working with any of our industry partners that, we've, created relationships over the years. We've reached out. Alumni is a big part of who helps us. So we're really just trying to tap into the different resources that we have and really go, with those different professional opportunities that we can find through them.
Thank you. Does NICEAD compliance pose a challenge to serving the students at your school?
So it's I don't want to say it poses a challenge. It's a lot. it's a lot to maintain. It's a lot of checks and balances that you have to keep in track of. Definitely being in COVID obviously has made a huge impact on all of us, on our ability to continue to do the work the way that we were accustomed to doing it. Have things become a challenge in the past year and a half? Absolutely. Being able to get all the internships, like, if you think about, and this applies to many other industries, the culinary industry was decimated right now during this time, and our partners, they're not even working themselves, through most of this. So, when we think about the work-based learning component of it and our partners, and they were struggling, that was definitely a big challenge last year. Now, as they're starting to recreate themselves and their industry starting to open back up again, and they're opening up in different ways as well, we're really kind of tapping into that and learning and teaching our students what's happening in the industry. So, the challenges that we all came across, assessments, internships, being able to get the students to commit to all of these things that they typically would have when we were in the building together is very difficult now in the remote setting as well, because when they're in the building and their classes are over for the day and we have a great chef demo in the afternoon, they all are so excited to come back to the classroom, and they cook and clean and participate. Now it's like, hop on another meeting with us, hop on another Zoom, hop on another, meet. And it's a lot for the kids. It really is. And so sometimes even this year, the participation level has definitely changed. The ones that are wanting, that are yearning for it, are still signing up for everything under the sun. But it's difficult because we don't have that face-to-face connection. We can't just pop by their classroom and remind them about an application to fill out. So, as far as those struggles or difficulties on our part, that's what's leading to the difficulties, keeping with the numbers that we used to keep with the NICEAD compliance. We still are, we're doing the best we can, but those challenges certainly do affect, the number of students that are able to participate. I hope that answers the question.
It's all right. What are the activities that have been your go-to for your students?
So we've kind of continued with a lot of what we've had in the past. Obviously, some things are not as easily offered right now in the remote setting. So we've had tons of guest speakers throughout the year. We've had even some tours with some different places virtually. We did a big career night that was really, it was the kid. we spent so much time planning that night, and it ended up being like 2.5 hours long, and they were like, we want more. So, I was excited to see that those activities are still exciting to them, and they're still participating with that. Job shadows, obviously we couldn't do that this year. Not quite the same. I mean, there are, virtual job shadows, but it's not quite the same as that hands-on component. We've done college tours, we've done financial aid nights, we've done resume writing. We are doing the internships. I would say actually one creative thing that we did this year that has elevated our program is that as the teachers of the culinary program, we created a YouTube channel to get all of our demos out there for the students to watch. And so when we had all this work-based learning money to figure out, the SIF money to figure out how we can create internships, we actually created an internship that is a videography internship. So students are working with us, creating their, it just kind of began now in the spring, but they're going to be creating their own cooking demos, and then that will be put on our YouTube page, so that now it's customer facing. It'll be part of program, our promotional material for our program. So we got very creative with that, and the kids really are starting to come up with some great ideas. So we're excited to see where they take it, and that'll be something that goes forward. So while there was a lot of while there was a lot of stresses and a lot of things that we couldn't do as normal, we were able to actually find new and creative ways to to engage with the students and promote the program. So just getting, I guess that was one of the other things we did.
Thanks for that, because I was actually looking for a way to transition over to your YouTube page that you mentioned yesterday. And, like I told you, I thought that was dope, because the engagement piece with your students, I think like it really speaks to that, especially in a remote space where you don't have that contact with your students. I thought that was a great way of keeping your students engaged. Thanks for that. Last question. I'm sorry, you're going to say something?
And the one other thing I wanted to mention, so through our commission and working with a program called At the Table, they were able to provide for culinary students the opportunity to receive HelloFresh meal kits. So it's actually, our first delivery is coming tomorrow. Students signed up and the deliveries are coming right to their house. So we've actually have a couple of projects going on with the HelloFresh meal kits. And one of the projects we have going on is that we're going to have a Saturday enrichment program where we'll cook live with the students. So this way now they have the materials, which that's been a struggle. Being able to send food home to students was not so easy in this environment. So we finally were able to find a way to get that to happen. And now we'll be able to have that moment to cook with them, a little extra on the weekends with these fun meal kits. So we're excited for that. So, we just new and creative ways. You have to see what you have, at your disposal and try to figure out how to make it happen for the kids.
Nice. I think our marshmallows are almost done. So I have one more question for you. What's the best way to align your scope and sequence to the NYSED requirements?
So, I know it's very overwhelming. I was thinking about this as I was listening to some of the information before, and I know it's very overwhelming for those that are new into CTE and work-based learning, to get a grasp on how to get this all set up and get everything aligned and everything documented and so forth. And the one thing I was really thinking about, it's just as difficult and challenging for me, even after 14 years, right? It's a lot of work. It's a lot of coordination. So, just thinking for some advice for like the new individuals who are in this, start small. Think about, just look at the different levels of awareness and exploration and prep, and just start with one activity from each, and then start to build upon that every year. And, reach out to other people that, have been doing this and get advice from them and guidance. I don't do everything perfectly. I don't proclaim myself to be the best at what I do, but I like to be able to help others, and I like to collaborate with others, get ideas and grow my own program and help them grow theirs as well. But, build up, ask for help, lean on your partners, go back to your alumni. If you're new, maybe you don't have the alumni, that connection, but, see how you can connect with other alumni, that have been from the program that you're running now. But it's all about organization. It's all about keeping detailed documentation. It's getting better, because I think that, Central has really listened to us and heard, the WBL team and CTE team, I should say, have heard that we needed resources. We needed to have a CTS system. We needed to have guidance. For years, and this is going back quite some time, I felt always like every year I was like, why wasn't I told this 5 years ago that I needed to have this information for reapproval? And, and now there's a program quality team, and they're, standing by us year after year and walking us through it. So there are so many resources out there. You have to reach out for that assistance. You have to keep things organized. That's like the number one thing. You have to keep your documentation organized, and that will make everything go very smoothly. So I hope that answered that question.
No, it does. And, and I mentioned it before, but thank you very much for just being transparent and just being open and honest, with everyone with the questions. If there are any questions that maybe I didn't ask, I think you guys, the floor will be open during our next segment. And if you do, Ms. Parker, if you're still available, we encourage people to still drop some questions into the chat. But thank you for your time. We definitely appreciate it.
No problem.
Hopefully everyone took something away from this, and we'll be able to talk again in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. And I'm going to transition back over to Takia.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you so much, Laura. This was so illuminating, especially as someone who has been doing this for some time. And I know that folks may want to ask you questions. And so we're going to open it up now for discussion for anybody who wants to direct a question specifically to Laura. I have someone in the chat asking, can the teacher get in trouble if the student gets hurt attempting a technical skill for a remote internship? I don't know if that's specifically for Ms. Parker or if that's just a general one that maybe Kendall might be able to answer. But we do want to make sure that we are addressing Laura for anything that is, school-based that you might have questions about. You have a colleague who is willing to be transparent with you. So please use this opportunity. We do have some time. Unmute yourself, ask her a question. We really encourage you guys. So we're going to
I can just maybe offer some advice to that question.
Sure.
So for the culinary programs, we had a parent consent form that was developed by the Department of Education, by their legal team. So I would say that, I don't know, Tiffany, what sector that you teach, but reach out to your commission and see if there's something that does exist for your sector. Because yes, you have to make sure that our students are protected and make sure that the parent is, aware of whatever, issues that may take place. That they have to take the responsibility of approving their child to do those activities.
Thank you for that. Any additional questions, guys? The floor is open. You guys are getting one opportunity to ask Laura anything, and you're missing it if you don't ask questions now. Someone in the chat, Damaris, just said, thank you for being so honest and letting us know that we're not alone with the struggles. I think that's huge. Just having the community, as we talked about earlier, knowing that you can lean on your peers, and there are folks that you might be able to message or email outside of these sessions to ask specific questions that maybe you don't want the spotlight on just right now. But hopefully it's bringing you guys together so you can see who's all in the community. Laura Miller, to everyone, what are you doing differently to ensure students accrue 54 hours during their time in high school? So I'll address that to you, Laura to Laura.
Yeah, so organization and documentation, making sure that you are tracking every student. I think that, there are some coordinators are tracking everything on their employability skills profile, whatever hours that they're doing. I just have one spreadsheet that goes for every student, and we just add a column on for every activity and then track their hours that way. Now with the CTS system, you're going to be able to put in the activities with the roster, and you're going to be able to identify the number of hours and everything that they did, so that you can easily run reports. So we just make sure, this year, CTISP is now offering the ISP prep program. So I'm really trying to encourage students to take advantage of that, because that's 20 hours of work-based learning. And it's really good for any grade level, because it's just the prep for future, just future working in general. But what do we do? It's really like, we make sure that in their 9th and 10th grade, they've accumulated X amount of hours. And then we try to make sure that they've gotten in at least half their hours before their senior year, because, we don't want them to all of a sudden at the end be scrambling to get all this done. And what if, we don't have that many activities or that many amount of hours. So, for culinary and hospitality, it's kind of easy over the years to have different, activities on the weekends and, catering activities, customer facing, types of things for the students to be able to get their hours in, prep work beforehand, executing the actual event and cleaning up afterwards. So we try to, if the students aren't choosing to do some of these outside activities, like going to different partners, we try to get them to do activities within the school after school and on the weekends. And we try to keep it, again, like X amount of hours per year so that it's kind of balanced out. And then, we talk about it all the time. And I mean, how many times I talk about it and post about it, especially now, and I'm always posting their CTE endorsement requirements. And I still get so many questions. And I'm like, but I posted this like 10 times. So it's just that constant conversation and reminder, advertise, throughout your classrooms or wherever, the WBL office is, communicate with the teachers. Like I teach the culinary program, so it's easy for me to communicate in that program and keep everything going. It's definitely a challenge, when you're not teaching the program and you're just the coordinator. So, that's one thing that I would suggest. I hope that it helped. Easy way to creme brulee. I love that.
We'll leave the recipes to the next segment. And I know
on the YouTube for you.
You guys have the YouTube. That's right. So plugging that. Let me see. I think there's 2 more questions that came up. Is there practice or a strategy to foster student ownership with hours? For example, sharing a student the status of their hours, sharing with the student. How do you get students to kind of self-advocate?
Yeah, so, one thing that Kendall had brought to our attention a few years ago was with the employability skills profile. The students should be seeing that twice a year. At minimum, they should be seeing it twice a year, right? So we always start the year off talking about it. We bring it up mid-year. It's always a conversation, but as far as them physically seeing their employability skills profile, and then at the end of the year when they wrap it up, we always make sure that they do some sort of a documentation of what activities. So we always make sure that it is spoken about as far as their activities, so that they're always aware. I tried, was it a couple of years ago? I think now I'll have more success with Google Forms, but a few years ago I tried, and I created a QR code and I put it up in the classroom, and I was like, okay, every time you do an activity, just scan the QR code and document your own hours, right? And that was a way for me to do a double check and for them to always be aware and checking in and kind of, clocking in and stuff like that. Employability profile, no more skills, sorry. But I think now with the CTS system, they're going to be able to see, correct me if I'm wrong, but now that once we get all the data in there, they should be able to just look at their own profile. Am I correct in saying that, and see their own hours there?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so that's going to become a little bit more, facing towards them, that, but constant conversation, constant reminders. Yeah. We try so much to move away from paper over the years. So if you did have paper files and there was some sort of portfolio, an idea that we want to put into place, and now that students are more comfortable with Google Slides and all the Google platform, we want to, create a portfolio that the students start at the beginning of their program, and then just constantly just keep adding their own pictures and pages and track, the work that they're doing and so forth. So that might be a way, if you get something in place like that. So this way they can always physically go back and see the work that they're doing, or take a picture of the event that they went to and then just type in a little documentation. So that might be another way, so this way they have more of something more tangible to, look back upon and show, and hopefully that would help.
Thank you so much, Laura. Anyone else with last minute questions? We definitely don't want to lose the opportunity of hearing from someone who's on the ground with you. And again, we want to make sure that you can continue to have this conversation. So I was just going to ask you if it was okay for you to drop your email. So if you guys want to reach out to her privately, feel free to do that. But also just, anything you're asking might definitely edify folks who are here. So we want to make sure that we get the questions on air so that someone else might be able to leave here with some nuggets of wisdom. So as Gerard said, Laura, thank you for everything. This has been amazing. We appreciate your time, the planning that went into this, and just being able to share and be transparent. And again, we want to make sure that as you guys continue on, you get to hear back about what colleagues are doing. So we have to put a plug in for the CTE Spotlight, which does give folks a chance to kind of, brag about what's going on at their school. So we do want to make sure we get submissions in around things that are happening this month and through the rest of the semester. So please, look out for what culinary delights are being concocted at Laura's school. So thank you so much. We will direct people to the YouTube channel, and we appreciate your time so much. So
Well,
thank you. So moving on, Larry, if you could go back to the renaming slide, because we are about to go into breakouts, and I just want people to remember exactly what they need to do. There are a few folks who have not renamed themselves yet. So we want to make sure that you guys have this instruction. And so it's the slide right after that. Please add a 1, 2, 3, or 4 to the front of your name. Most everybody here has done it, but there are some folks who still don't have an identifier for what group they should be in. A special mention for group number 4, partnering with special populations. A lot of you have said in the pre-survey that you're still not necessarily there when it comes to planning with these young people in mind. We have Jasenia Crespo here, we have Audrey Mangan here, both from DEML and DCIS, who can actually provide you with step-by-step guidance. You can speak to them specifically about these students and how to best, make sure that you're building out your scope and sequence with them in mind. So for group number 4, if we can have more people sign up for that, that would be great. We are about to switch you guys over. So Larry, I'm sorry to keep making you go back and forth. You can go back to slide 17, just to give you guys a chance to see what the questions will be. We aren't going to take too long. We have about 20 minutes that we can spend in breakouts. We always are told that it's too short when it's 10 or 15 minutes. So we've added a little bit extra time. The questions you guys will be addressing is, introducing yourselves. How will you apply the information that's covered this week? We really want to know, how is this going to be used on the ground once you go back to your school? What advice do you wish you had received earlier around this content? Obviously some of you guys are seasoned, you've been doing this for a long time, others are new. What are some things that are sticking out to you like, if I had known this before, it would have made a huge difference for me? And then lastly, we want to be able to have groups come back out with a nugget of wisdom that we can, hold on to, for future generations of WBL coordinators, so that they can benefit from this knowledge. And it's not just stuck in a recording, but that we actually publish. These are the things that the folks on the ground are saying need to happen and that you guys are actually finding helpful. So we really would love to hear that share out. What I'm going to do right now is in the chat, I am putting in the note catchers, and these are for all of the 4 groups. So if you are going into a specific group, the note catcher with your group number is the one that we would hope that you can place your questions, your nugget of wisdom. You're going to be actually viewing this while you're in the group. So everybody in your group will have access, and they will be accessing this document weekly, so that every week we can see how this knowledge and wisdom evolves. And we want to make sure we're building on it. So it's not just random people dropping into groups every week, but it's your colleagues that you've been seeing who will hopefully benefit from this. And then again, like we said, we're taking this information and putting it out to the population within the CTE community for anyone who is coming behind this cohort to be able to benefit. And Audrey in the chat said, for folks who might have signed up for groups 1 to 3, but still want, she's supporting and meeting the needs of students with disabilities, and you can reach out to her at her email. So if those folks who maybe not get a chance to talk to Audrey and Jasenia today want to reach out specifically about SWIDS, you can do so. And so, need edit access. So Jason, which document is this? I think all of you should have it, but let me go back and make sure that it's there. I apologize if you did not have access. Hold on, note catchers. While that's happening, hopefully you're renaming yourself and Larry is getting a sense of how many people are going into each group. So we will get you in a few seconds into your group. While that's happening, I'm changing the edit access so all of you guys can get into the document. So hopefully you'll be moving in a few. Any other thoughts for the greater good of the community? All right, so with that, Larry, I'm gonna go ahead and change everybody's status to editor, and you can feel free to move folks as need be. All right, so we are back. I think most everybody is back in the room. I was just beginning to get a nugget of wisdom from my group when we got pulled away. So hopefully we will hear from folks, but there's another poll happening. So please let us know if you felt like you were in the right small group. If not, for whatever reason, we can switch you. Also, please remember that we have a fourth group, which unfortunately no one was able to participate in today, but it's around special populations and planning with them in mind. It will be available for the next 3 weeks as we come back for those of you who are signed up for the other 3 sessions. So don't forget that that is a group that maybe you didn't get the opportunity to participate in. I know Audrey Mangan has shared her email. Hopefully Jasenia Crespo will do the same. So if you guys have specific questions around those populations, you can reach out to them. Looks like most everybody felt like they were in the right group, and I was in a group and we had some really robust discussion happening. So this was obviously a good use of time, I would think. And I hope for those of you who stayed with us that you felt the same. Thank you, Audrey. She left a nugget of wisdom. So Larry, if we can move to the next slide, which is the share out slide, we can start to hear from any of the groups who want to share out. I was in group 3, and we talked a lot about, challenges, which is, I think, real. I think a lot of us are feeling like we might be in a vacuum experiencing what we're experiencing, but knowing that your community is, giving you the thumbs up and shaking their heads and agreeing with you, hopefully lets you know that you're here, you're supported, and also other people are in your shoes, so they do feel what you're saying. Our group number 3, the Nugget of Wisdom, was sharing these meetings with admins and work-based learning. There were folks, work-based learning coordinators, there were folks who are here who are representing schools who were looking around saying, where's my team? Where's everybody else? I'm not the coordinator. I'm maybe a CTE teacher, but the coordinator should be here, or the AP should be here. So that's a huge deal. I think, we send these invites out to the entire community, all the email addresses that we have in the beginning of the quarter. And so I don't know if everybody's getting the messages or if people are just, doing other things on the ground at your school at this time period. But we will have focus groups in June to get a sense of, did we put these at the right time? Was this the right time? Was this the right day? Everybody's schedule looks different, and it's always going to be hard to get 100% of the folks. But we just want to make sure that we're getting you guys at a time that is realistic and that is, as convenient as possible, especially with those who are actually physically in school. So that's one thing we'd love to be able to impart upon you guys, is to invite. If folks have not received the calendar, please forward it to them so they can register. So we'll have more of you supporting each other. If you are a lone wolf and you have nobody here, it's going to be really difficult for you to come back to your school and turnkey if you don't have other people doing this work with you. So I will get off my soapbox and I will ask for any of the other 2 groups to share, 1 or 2. What are your nuggets of wisdom? Anybody?
Well, hey, this is Desmond. I'm from group 2. So we actually had a really great conversation. And our conversation, the nugget kind of centralized around the idea of delegation and the ability to delegate, right? And some of the key themes around delegation was, one, delegation is necessary as much as humanly possible in order to actually just survive the work and not burn yourself out. 2, understanding that the definition of delegation for most of it really just kind of means taking the edges off of some of the extra work that you're doing and asking someone to do bits and pieces of that, because generally the person that you have that you're engaging to do that extra work also has an overly full plate. And so it's just kind of managing those things, right? So understanding that you're still going to be kind of just pushing through priorities, but knowing that, you know, if you ask people to do small manageable chunks, you'll probably be able to get a lot of small pieces, as opposed to saying, hey, I need you to do this big swath of something. And then also just, you know, another key piece of that pointer in terms of delegation is just facilitating the process for folk, especially using cloud technology, right? Since we have so many things that kind of live in the Google space, it really does allow for a bunch of minds to collaborate in a short time, you know, together, as opposed to having a bounce around of ideas and creating a lag effect. So that was really our thing, is just how to delegate and kind of understanding how to use it as a way to sustain yourself moving forward. You know, I just want to thank our guys again for the conversation. That was really great. Thank you.
Thank you, Desmond. Thank you for leading that group. And, you know, just to let folks know, on the 28th, we will have a session specifically on building capacity. And that hopefully will come up as a way to be able to broaden, you know, your post-secondary team. And so please tune in for that. We know that a lot of you want to be able to have support in this work. And the best way to do that, we want to get some suggestions and some guidance around that. So I really appreciate that from Group 2. Group 1, which is a gargantuan group. It was one of our biggest groups. Anybody want to share out? In the meantime, also drawing your attention to the chat where Jasenia has left her information for those of you who might want to follow up about Ls and MLLs. Anybody from Group 1 want to report out? Okay, as big as that
I'll
group
give it a
was.
shot. I'll give it a
Okay,
shot.
Thank you.
We had a very interesting discussion because we started talking about documentation and how we're a little concerned about different things, because again, we have some schools that have very large, you know, we have a couple of large schools. I know Wendy turned around and said that she was from Brooklyn Tech and they have 6,000 kids. I'm from Tottenville High School. I have 3,800 kids and about 800 in just, you know, in CTE alone. So, you know, kind of getting the documentation for all of them is kind of, you know, interesting, and comparing it with CTS. And we actually did speak about CTS a little bit. And so, you know, that was some of the topics that we talked about. We talked about, again, the getting the community, building the community. Damaris talked about the option of trying to offer some procession, which that was one thing we talked about. I spoke with my administration, and we're going to be doing with our teachers to help them, and for everybody to try to get as much access to CTS as far as CTE teachers and, you know, people that are going to be involved to get access for CTS. We talked about work-based learn and how to document some of our experiences, things like that.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to share out. And, you know, you're so right in that, you know, we do want to make sure that there's help with the documentation. So spreading it out, getting more people to log in. And we know that there were kinks and still maybe are things that are being tweaked in the system, but we're hopeful that as things start to really smoothen out, you'll be able to go in and use it as a one-stop shop so that reports can be pulled and that all of your information will be in one place. So you don't have to have spreadsheet after spreadsheet or Google Doc after Google Doc. We know that it's a process and we really appreciate your patience, but in the meantime, having more than one person supporting is going to be critical. And, you know, in terms of how we move forward, the documentation group is going to exist in every session that we have in the boot camp. So if there are some specific questions that you guys have and want to have representation to be able to take you through, that's one of the things that we'd like to be able to offer as we move forward. So, you know, please stay tuned for that. We only have a few minutes left, so I want to turn it back over to Larry, who will kind of round us out, ending up the session. But I just, again, want to thank you guys so much for staying with us, being part of the groups, you know, being transparent, speaking up. We're taking all of the information that you provide. The note catchers will be coming back week by week, so you can see what you wrote last week. You can see what your colleagues are writing this week, and we'll be able to share that out so people can benefit from it. So we just appreciate you guys sharing. And I'm going to turn it over to Larry.
Thanks, Zakia. So before you all run off, I'm just going to share our last poll with you guys. I promise this is the last one. You know, especially as we're starting to brand the boot camp, we just want to get a sense of what it is that we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, and different ways that we can improve, because we only have 3 more sessions after this one. So please indulge me on this survey real quick, and I will close out right after. While you're doing that, I'll just pivot over to the last page. So in closing out, the first link that we're going to leave you guys with is for the Institute Exit Survey link. So those of you who are interested in receiving CTLE credit, please definitely fill out that survey. The second link is actually to all of the upcoming Institute sessions that we have. It'll all be listed on our calendar. All of the offers that we have until June 16th. And of course, all the resources and tools and this recording will be made available in our resource folder within the next couple days. So please stay tuned for that. And on behalf of myself and Takia and Kendall and the rest of the CTE team, we bid you good afternoon.